I'm delighted to discuss this in-progress work entitled Building Community, Resisting Injustice, Strategies of Neurominority Users to Combat Epistemic Justice on Social Media. First, brief introductions of the study team. The work completed so far has been performed by myself and fellow Georgia Tech PhD student Kiavin Connolly and overseen by Dr. Amy Bruckman, all of us at Georgia Institute of Technology. Both student authors are members of the neurodivergent community of study. Over the course of this presentation, I hope to provide working understandings of important terms like neurodiversity, neurominority, and epistemic injustice, describe the setting and methods of the study, describe user experiences and connections between design and resistance of epistemic injustice, and to briefly initiate discussions of considerations for globalization of this work. So what is neurodiversity? The term neurodiversity was first introduced by sociologist Judy Singer, a third-generation autistic woman, and was intended as an advocacy term relating to the neurodiversity movement. She clarifies that neurodiversity is a biological truism that refers to the limitless variability of human nervous systems on the planet and might be understood in the way that biodiversity describes the variability in non-human species on the planet. From this, then, we understand that terms like neurodivergent and neurominority refers to individuals presenting with neurotypes or nervous systems characterized as autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyslexia, dyscalculia, Tourette's, intellectual disability, and other presentations. Singer goes on to add that neurodiversity is intended as an analytic lens for examining issues of inequity. So, we extend this work to investigate a community's means of overcoming inequities in epistemic resources. Here, we understand epistemic injustice to be a violation of one's capacities as a knower, as posited by Miranda Fricker, through a knower's testimony or their access to consume or participate in the creation of the knowledge that informs their understanding of their experiences. The issue of the idea of neurodivergence and epistemic injustice has been discussed and debated within the cognitive sciences. These discussions offer that the idea of neurodivergence implies a cognitive norm or dominance that is socially constructed by the neurodominant group, sometimes referred to as neurotypical. Narratives of neurodivergent presentations and needs being pathological are structurally reinforced and perpetuated by the institution of medicine and in society, excluding neurominorities from the access to consume or create knowledge related to their own experiences. This results in the inequitable distribution of hermeneutic resources needed for neurominorities to access equitable care and support. We see this in existing disparities of health outcomes for neurominorities that happen to meet the restrictive clinical criteria for neurodivergence. From estimates from the CDC of the number of children diagnosed with autism, it has been approximated that 1 in 5 adults are diagnosed with autism, and 4.4% of adults are diagnosed with ADHD, though both of these estimates are likely to be underrepresentative of the true proportion of neurominorities with these conditions. Among those that are diagnosed, neurominorities spend 4 times more on healthcare costs than neurodominant individuals, and neurominorities are at increased risk for unemployment challenges, obesity, disordered eating, and substance use. We should be additionally concerned about the outcomes of neurominorities lacking in the hermeneutic resources to identify their divergence and therefore access care and support. Finally, we hope to put this work in conversation with ongoing work in computing. Extensive studies in both HCI and CSCW discuss the benefits and harms of social media use and disclosure for marginalized groups. There are trade-offs that are relevant to neurominorities. While social networking sites can be great for social support seeking and epistemic contributions, making online communities an appropriate venue for studying epistemic injustice, they are also a hotbed for mis and disinformation and online harms to which marginalized groups are especially susceptible. We also connect this work with calls to better center neurodiversity, neurodivergent users, and neurodivergent researchers in HCI design, and also extend existing neurodiversity research beyond children and adolescents, as neurodivergent children grow into neurodivergent adults and do not grow out of their neurotype. That brings us to our research questions. How do the design attributes of Instagram enable or inhibit the formation of online neurominority communities? How do members of online neurominority communities leverage the design attributes of Instagram to resist epistemic injustice? And how do neurominority individuals navigate disclosure and privacy related to their neurodivergence on Instagram? Now, to describe the methods used so far in this work, our study takes place on Instagram, which is a social networking site on which people share short-form content and utilizes an algorithmic recommender system to push relevant content to users. Increases in self-diagnosis have been attributed to platforms like Instagram and TikTok over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic that have been recently studied. The shape of the community on sites like Instagram is much fuzzier than forum sites like Reddit. So, the bounds of the community for this study were determined by an extensive capture of users creating neurodiversity content. To date, we have conducted approximately 40 hours of field work and community participation on the platform. During participation, we recruited study participants by messaging self-identified neurominority users gathered in the comments of the community or content creators themselves to invite them to be interviewed. The 5 interviews conducted to date were no longer than 90 minutes in length and were conducted by Zoom call. We then analyzed the interview transcripts using thematic analysis as characterized by Braun and Clark. What we found so far? Well, first, let's talk about our participants. Participant names are anonymized here where users requested to be anonymized, and we use A names corresponding to their self-identified ethnicity and gender. Though this study does not examine intersectionality, we understand even from this small number of participants that intersectionality would be an essential lens for future work, as several users are multiply marginalized in their identities, thus influencing their capacities to resist epistemic injustice at the individual level. In our first research question, we examined the design features of Instagram and their roles in forming or undermining the neurodivergent community online. While we observed several uses of Instagram features such as posts, stories, reels, and comments as online community gathering spaces, I'm going to focus on the interaction between the roles of community users and the business model of the social networking site that is Instagram, surveillance capitalism, its role in shaping the community and its capacities to resist epistemic injustice. Bruckman notes that in Should You Believe Wikipedia, that people often pay for the use of free sites with permittance of uninhibited collection of their data. Shoshana Zuboff characterizes this as an arm of surveillance capitalism and states, unequal knowledge about us produces unequal power over us. And so epistemic inequality widens to include the distance between what we can do and what can be done to us. Given this, we observe that the neurodivergent community resists such a knowledge inequality by leveraging the platform's business model to increase the epistemic value of lived neurodivergent experiences. We produce an equivalent to Bartle's presentation of a simple taxonomy of user roles from MUDs. In the neurodivergent Instagram community, users can be organized along axes of content knowledge creation to content knowledge consumption and content knowledge discovery to content knowledge dissemination, where knowledge through individual testimony becomes a hermeneutical resource for those consuming it. Even though we identify dynamic boundaries of the community through the comment section of most posts, the purpose of the community being awareness and advocacy suggests that dissemination of information should be centered rather than participant interaction with one another. This produces 4 roles visualized in the figure here: creators, objectives, observers, and couriers. Creators are content creators like Matt. Their participation in the community emphasizes the creation or adaptation of original informational content relating to neurodiversity with the intent of raising awareness, informing, educating, or normalizing neurodivergent experiences, and disseminating it broadly. The emphasis on dissemination can also be exemplified through the use of multiple social computing platforms, Facebook, X, TikTok, and YouTube, to reach broader audiences with identical content. Mechanisms of dissemination leverage Instagram features, stories, reels, posts, and broadcasts to disseminate short-form content. Objectors, as described, the content that creators generate comprise the public spaces of the community where participants can be observed interacting. This space is also one of 2 primary locations where other Instagram users openly counter with an attempt to discredit the information or knowledge being disseminated by creators. Objectors display behaviors that include posting comments that disagree with creators, replying to comments of other participants that resonate with the creator's content to dismiss their experiences, We learned from Matt that objectors also utilize the direct message feature to contact content creators directly to dissent, sometimes with greater frequency and vitriol than what the authors could observe in the comments. On some occasions, we observed objectors generating their own short form counter content to contest the use of certain terminology. Observers are most similar to the participants of modern day. Observers tend to lurk around in the community. They consume the content either passively or mediated by the Instagram algorithm, or actively by seeking out the content through the use of Instagram search functions. Observers strictly consume the content to discover insights about the topic of neurodiversity or to inform their personal process of self-discovery and accommodation. Observers differ from couriers primarily in their use of Instagram design features and that they do not share the content to stories, messages, reels, or remix options to disseminate the information further across their networks. Couriers best describe users like participant Anna. Couriers are the most frequent users of the sharing design features on Instagram. Their participation in the community is best characterized between the spectrum of creating new knowledge and understanding about neurodiversity for their self and collective discovery. Couriers like Anna share resonant and relatable content to safe friends using the direct message feature, to their entire following using sharing to stories, and to other platforms, specifically Facebook, through Instagram's linked accounts. While couriers tend to facilitate the dissemination that creators seek to achieve, their dissemination behaviors are more of a result of their responses to being validated and seen by the content they are consuming. We can then understand the formation of the neurodiversity movement online, or the neurodivergent community, at the intersection of community roles and a subversion of the platform surveillance capitalism business model. Neurominorities on Instagram participate and contribute in a market of personal data sharing and collection to exploit said market and platform design features and increase the epistemic value of their perspectives and experiences. The variety of content types disseminated by multiple users increases the epistemic virtue of power by allowing the community to resist concerns of epistemic completeness through increasing the amount of knowledge being provided. The nature of the Instagram algorithm enables the community to strengthen the epistemic virtue of speed by leveraging the virality of content through engagement of objectors and couriers to quickly reach users, and the behaviors of couriers disseminating the content through direct messages, stories, Facebook, and Reels and profile highlights strengthen the epistemic virtue of fecundity by increasing the number of people exposed to the knowledge. Through this exploitation of design and information market, we may understand the neurodivergent Instagram community to resist epistemic injustice through exemplifying the wisdom of crowds, through extending collective knowledge via platform and mediated aggregation of individual stories. Regarding our second research question, we discuss how neurodivergent community online is countering restrictive and disempowering narratives held by clinicians and neurodominant groups toward reclaiming and more widely dispersing hermeneutical resources essential for self-discovery. We can see through the user roles that debate and dissent are standard components of community discourse. After all, its creation springs from the desire to increase awareness and visibility of neurodivergent individuals and counter the systems that inhibit their quality of life. Reliability and verifiability of neurodivergent content on Instagram will likely continue to be hotly debated. Still, community participants think that this exercise in crowd wisdom and its potential to surface oversimplifications and misinformation is still worthwhile. The benefits to the community outweigh the harms. Matt Reckelboom shares that intention is powerful, regardless of the type and quality of the content. There's a big trend right now, he says, of neurodiverse people that are like, if you're ADHD, that means that you enjoy sniffing flowers in the forest. And like, to a certain degree, there's a certain like, screw you, don't say that. That's not true. But there's literally tens of millions of people that are going to see that. And if we even break that down to 0.1% of people that see it and go, I don't think that's true, but I am kind of curious, and it leads them to figuring out what they never knew, then that stupid video that's not accurate, not well done at the moment, and just frustrating a lot of psychologists that are demonizing the TikTokification of the online world right now, I think it's so needed, because before this, psychologists weren't doing their job. The awareness wasn't there. Ade brought up a distinction between content that helps people explore and understand themselves organically versus content that he felt might put too much pressure on some people when it comes to this type of information. If you're able to self-diagnose in a way that can be beneficial to you in your health and your own personal journey through life, please, by all means. If it's the lay diagnosis of another person, then that puts them in a box that even maybe they're not necessarily ready to be in, even if the diagnosis is correct. I just don't see how that can be productive for anybody. He preferred seeing content related to neurodivergent life experiences than those that centered around categorizing neurodivergent traits or diagnosing, and said that the latter type of content motivated him to question more whether he personally had ADHD. And other users like Anna offer that as they come into understanding their own neurotype and caring for their neurodiverse children, that there is a need to resist historical narratives and perceptions of ADHD and autism and take just a more affirming position rather than like a more like what it used to be, like where it was ADHD and autism are bad. I'm trying to instill in my children the idea that they are perfect the way that they are, and they can use their diagnoses to learn how their brains are. There's wonderful components to how they view the world. And Anna suggests that social media platforms like Instagram are the best way to do that. I feel like social media is the easiest way to share information with them and just create overall awareness. So that's why I tend to repost a lot of things that have to do with ADHD, autism, and all of that. Amanda also discussed how talking about shared experiences with other people who had autism helped her become more comfortable with her diagnosis. One of the problems with clinical perspectives that honestly, it's getting better at now, she says. So yeah, obviously, if I had the same experience again, I would go through something different probably. But when I was diagnosed with it, it just felt like a diagnosis, a label, something that was wrong with me. And so it kind of reminded me of all those times that I put the dishes away wrong. I said something wrong. I had the wrong tone. It was all about wrong, you know? What can we do to fix Amanda? What can we do to make her round peg fit a square hole? It was not about making a hole fit the hole more circular. And so finding out the experiences of other people with autism made it more like not adjustable, but like easy to deal with. In our third research question, we explore considerations for privacy and design. In a 2015 Equisi et al. Publication on privacy, the theme of preference uncertainty is surfaced as the result of the invisibility of privacy violations as a consequence of the intangibility of privacy harms and trade-offs. Available privacy features on Instagram consist of the options to make your profile public or private, create a list of close friends who can see a separate story you post, blocking other users, and hiding content from other users. Interestingly enough, none of the participants we interviewed so far had immediate thoughts about leveraging any of these features towards the goal of privacy. For example, Amar inquired, I don't really have any thoughts. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. Yeah, I don't even know what the question is. Like privacy in relation to ADHD, what does that mean? Amanda even noted that she had explicit lack of concern about privacy due to the information that was already likely to be available about her on the internet. Honestly, this is the internet. You can find anything about anyone if you tried hard enough. So unless something really, really proprietary and needed to know, like my social security number of something, I'm not really worried about it. I'm not too worried about it. At most, decisions about profile signals, privacy settings, and content creation were informed more by their overall presentation of self than the consideration for their neurotype and raising ADHD awareness. Finally, I want to briefly extend this conversation to consider the globalization of this work. Some considerations of this in-progress work. The first is that our findings echo the concerns of the cognitive sciences regarding the social construction of neurodivergence actively limiting hermeneutical resources for self-identifying and help-seeking. Still, this analysis is highly situated in the United States, where failure to adhere to social and cultural expectations of the neurodominant result in the neurodivergent traits as ones of deficit. However, in other cultures or settings, neurodivergent traits may be supported or even unnoticed in society. Thus, neurominorities may not be actively resisting epistemic injustice or inequities in other contexts. Additionally, in this work, we found that neurominorities are subverting extensive personal data collection to their benefit in self-identifying and advocacy. But in contexts like the EU, where data privacy laws are more robust, we consider that such strategies for resistance will be difficult to deploy. This brings me to the next consideration, where it might be appealing to initiate this research in other global contexts by starting with a community of interest. There may be more value in centering the idea of resistance as a starting point, as structural constraints of a population populations' epistemic resources can vary, so do their means of motivation for resistance. Centering resistance as an analytic lens then opens new questions related to designing for justice in all contexts, domestic and globally. Thanks so much.